Hey everybody, welcome back to Space Problems. This is episode 7. I am Derek.
And I'm Ben.
We're going to do something a little different on today's episode. We're actually going to try a new format. We're going to call it Overrated and Underappreciated. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to talk about sci-fi movies that are both overrated and ones that are underappreciated. So Ben, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, hence the title.
All
right.
Sorry, was it was a little obvious there.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. All right, so we're going to start today out with Avatar. Now, fuck Avatar, but
and just to clarify, so the way we have this set up is basically when we say overrated, we're not trying to necessarily say these films are bad. You know, it's not like, here's some crappy movies and here's some good movies. The point is basically we're trying to say that certain movies don't necessarily deserve the praise they get, and then there's others that deserve a lot more praise that haven't gotten the attention that it deserves.
Yeah, Avatar is a perfect example of something that is very overrated. And it's not that I don't enjoy Avatar. I enjoy it for what it is, but I don't take it as serious as James Cameron thinks I should.
That's a very good way of putting that.
And it's by no means a masterpiece. I mean, it's basically Dances with Wolves in space, and it feels like a Disney film half the time. Like, I feel like when Sam Worthington was chasing the Na'vi girl, the Zoe Saldana's character, I forget her name, I don't even care, but chasing her through the woods, I was half expecting some kind of Disney song to start playing as they were running through the forest.
Yeah, I could see that. I think someone put it very well when they called it Dances with Smurfs. It's, I mean, I know a lot of people have pointed out the whole, it's basically Dance with Wolves, Pocahontas, Last Samurai, etc., all over again. But I wouldn't even mind that so much, because there's a lot of films where the basic premise has been repeated constantly. What bothers me about Avatar is the fact that it's just so basic as far as story-wise.
It's exactly by the numbers. It's a very by the numbers movie. It's more of a technical advancement in film more than story. It's just like, look at all the pretty shit that we can do now. Yeah.
It's really, it feels more like a demo reel, that was put out by a VFX company. And I will give that to them as far as credit goes. I mean, credit where credit's due. Technically, this film is amazing. As far as visual effects, just filmmaking in general, it's a technically very, very well put together movie. But as just, as an audience member, I go to movies for story. Everything else is just icing on the cake. I have seen movies that were made really low budget, indie, with VHS cameras, where the picture quality is awful, but the sound is still decent enough. But the story is incredible. And I've been riveted the whole time. Because the thing is as an audience member, I will forgive bad picture. It's harder to forgive bad sound, but I will forgive those technical limitations if your story is compelling. This has the opposite problem. Everything else is done extremely well, but their story is just so flat and bland, and like you said, by the numbers. It's very stereotypical. I can't get over the whole, scientists good, military bad. In some of these cases, it's so incredibly, I don't even know what to equate it to. It's like a bad cartoon from years ago, where it was just here's your villain, here's your hero.
They really treat you like an idiot almost, because it's your typical, save nature, the military's bad, hate corporations, hey, remember what you did to the Native Americans? It's very shoving it in your face so much, to the point where you have greedy corporate bad guy, super evil general with a scar.
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't even mind that stuff if it was just done well. I mean, they did similar things in Aliens, when Cameron directed that one, and I didn't even mind, because the rest of the film and the story itself was really good and complex. But this is just, it's the fact that everything is cartoony. Everything is just so over the top, stereotyped, and one-dimensional, and just predictable. and at the same time, it's like you said, James Cameron wants you to take this really seriously, but at the same time, they named it Unobtainium. Are you freaking kidding me with this? It really feels like a 12-year-old wrote this script. You know,
I mean, it's like if you got to the, you're watching Aliens and then you figure out the xenomorphs are called buggy stabbies, and it really does kind of take you out of it.
It does.
But no, like, as you said, like everything is so one dimensional. Well, that's because he spent the other money on getting the film 3-dimensional that he forgot to put the acting and the story in more than one.
That's pretty good.
Do we really need 4 sequels?
Oh,
and how
no.
did this get 4?
No.
How did this get approved for 4 sequels? This is where the Overrated comes in, because they greenlit 4 sequels immediately. No film ever just gets greenlit like that.
Well, to be fair, I mean, the problem is you're dealing with James Cameron's reputation.
Ego?
Well, I'm trying to be polite here. James Cameron's reputation, which is basically he has 2 films under his belt that were both at one point the highest grossing films of all time. So, yeah. I think if Hollywood's going to give anybody a blank check, they're going to give it to this guy. Unfortunately, it's a terrible idea. It's a really terrible idea. Because,
so far, it's been financially successful for them, though.
Right, but
Titanic and Avatar.
Although
this still kind of has the same regurgitating love story as Titanic. It's like guy falls in love with girl from a different background, slowly gets to know each other. Then, like right after they hook up, that's when disaster happens. Sorry, go on.
That's a good point. But ultimately, what I'm getting at is, I think the luster of Avatar has worn off with even just the general public over time. I mean, like, yeah, we're talking that it's overrated, but we're also talking about it being overrated comparing to its opening year hype. Because, when it opened, everybody was just gushing over, oh, this movie's amazing, you have to see it, everybody loved it. I felt like, at least this is me, at the time, when I left the theater, I felt like I was one of the only people saying, well, that was pretty dumb. It was kind of this really basic story, and everything was pretty, but what's the big deal? I don't see why everybody's getting all worked up over this. Because I remember talking to people at the time, and that was very much the feeling I had for that whole first year. It really wasn't until a few years later that I started to hear people say things about, like, yeah, Avatar was kind of just Dances with Wolves again, and, et cetera, et cetera. At least this is my perception of things. I feel like people started to, as they got further away from the movie, they started thinking about it more and being like, maybe it wasn't as good. And because of that, I think the sequels are a really terrible idea. Because ultimately, people come back for sequels because they want more time in that world, more time with those characters. Not because they want to see the new, cool, pretty thing. And unfortunately, I still think Avatar 2 is going to have a big opening just because it's Avatar 2, but I have a feeling that that's going to taper off really sharply. Like, it'll probably have a good strong opening weekend, and it'll probably drop off really fast in the second week. And then
it'll have a strong opening, but then after about a week of critics and reviews, and it's going to sharply drop off, and people are going to be disappointed, I think.
Right.
I mean, they've even said Stephen Lang is going to be the villain even for the next 4 films, even though he died in the first one. And then James Cameron was like, well, he's like the Darth Vader of the series. I'm like, oh, so you're going to start bringing Star Wars into this now. It's like, I'm already checked out. And you're going to shoot it at 60 frames a second?
If he's really going to commit to the 60 frames a second, it's going to do worse than even that prediction, I believe. Because it's just, the high frame rate thing, it's just not going to happen. Stop trying to make it happen, because they've tried several times. Most notably, the last 2 that come to mind were The Hobbit and 48 frames per second. And, what was that last one? It was, somebody's halftime walk with, Ang Lee. Ang Lee directed, I feel bad, I don't remember the name of the title, but it was basically like somebody's halftime walk, and it was a soldier story. And they shot at a high frame rate and showed it off at like some cinema expo with everything, all the bells and whistles. It was HDR, it was high frame rate, it was all these things, and that got a very poor reception as well. It's just, audiences, I genuinely don't think are going to get behind the high frame rate thing, largely just because we have 100+ years of cinema telling us that 24 frames per second is what looks cinematic. That's what looks good. That's what looks like a movie. And due to the 80s and the rise of video, everybody who had a VHS tape or a VHS player, who have home movies from the time, those were all shot at 60 frames per second. So that looks like video. That looks like bad home movies. So when someone sees something at 60 frames per second, they have that association. And that's a
Would they have that
cultural
association
thing.
now? Would they have that association now because the people that didn't grow up with like home videos, like now it's like DSLRs are more common, and then you have the option of selecting 24, 25, 30, 48, 50, and 60 almost now.
True, but no one ever, very rarely does anybody actually play back in 60 frames per second. They use 60 frames per second for slow-mo. My point is that usually when people show video at 60 frames a second, there is a cultural-wide perception that this is somehow less quality. It's like a cheap thing. It's like it looks too real. It looks too much like reality. It doesn't seem cinematic. And while you're right, probably the older generation is going to associate that with VHS video, I still think the younger generation is going to be uneasy with it simply because, again, we have 100 and plus years, of movies telling us that this is the way things are.
Right.
So
if they haven't, basically if they've watched a movie in the last lifetime, then they should probably understand something's not right. Not that they're going to identify right away. Why does this look like a soap opera?
Yeah, exactly. I think they probably won't be able, most people won't be able to articulate what bothers them about it, but it's like, it reminds me of a lot of those TVs that for a while there, they kept doing the artificial motion smoothing that everybody, there's like, most people hated that. One of my friends actually said, because I tried to watch a movie over at his house, and it was really bothering me. I was like, what is wrong with your TV? And he's like, oh, it's got that artificial motion smoothing thing on it. And I was like, how can you watch this like this? Because it was really messing with me. And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, it really bothered me for like a week, but then I got used to it. And now I don't really notice. But I think a lot of that was because he'd also just invested like, on $1,000+ TV. But the thing
I disabled mine immediately.
Yeah, like the thing
when
is,
I got home.
I'm like, most people just might not know that there's a setting there that you can just turn off. But everybody that I've spoken to, and the general consensus I seem to see online, is that nobody likes that. And that's kind of the thing, is because that unnatural motion, people notice it. They might not be able to consciously register or articulate what it is, but they notice. And I just think, if James Cameron really wants to just dig his heels in and actually do this whole thing in 60, and then he's going to have to convince all of these theaters to invest in projection at 60 frames per second. I don't know. I really feel like he's heading, full speed toward a brick wall.
Well, we'll see, because they've been announced for some time now, and I haven't heard anything on them except maybe an additional article once in a while.
I did see an update most recently that has the first sequel, Avatar 2, premiering in 2020, which is a full 11 years after the first one. I have no idea why. It kind of reminds me of like when they talked about the first film and like how it took 10 years to make Avatar, because they were waiting for the technology to catch up. But what excuse do you have now? Like, come on. Like, what's James Cameron been doing for the last 11 years? Just kind of like sitting on a giant pile of money, just like being like, I'll get to it eventually. Like, is he like Scrooge McDucking it? Like he's just swimming in a big pool of money.
Yeah, well, first he was waiting for the technology to catch up. Now he's waiting for reality to catch up. And oh shit, I have bills to pay again. I should get on that Avatar 2 thing. Yeah,
someone might want to actually hold me to that. Of course, now, in recent news, this is a little off topic, but it's worth mentioning, that James Cameron is now trying to get the rights back to Terminator, and he wants to reboot the franchise, which, I gotta say...
Stop.
At this point, I'm like, sure, give him a shot. Because... Terminator couldn't be more in the trash pile at this point if it tried. And
no, I agree. It's one of those things where I think it should just stop now. Just give up. I guess, okay, if this doesn't work, when he gets it back, then give up.
Well, he's not going to direct it, though. He's actually only going to get the rights, and then he's going to, like, sort of creatively oversee it, and he's going to have somebody else direct it. So we'll see how...
Still not convinced.
I mean,
Still not convinced.
I would be a lot more excited about this if it hadn't been for what's been going on with Ridley Scott and Alien. You know, because that hasn't exactly worked out the best. So we'll see. But anyway,
but let's not get back on Alien right now. I'm still recovering from that. Enough about Avatar then. Derek, let's start with what do you think is pick one of your underrated films. Let's go to a positive from here.
Okay, all right. My underrated pick, at least for this episode, is the very well done and unfortunately not seen by enough people movie, because that's a good sentence. But my pick is Moon with Sam Rockwell. It is Sam Rockwell and Kevin Spacey. It is
Kevin Spacey's the AI, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the robot. It is a phenomenal film. I usually don't say that. I mean, like, even my favorite films, I'll usually say, you know, it's a really great film or it's a good film or something like that. But this one really blew me away because it's kind of a hit on everything. It's very well done. It's a really good story that keeps you very compelled through the whole thing. But it's also incredibly well acted. Really well presented. From a technical standpoint, it's extremely well done. But what's most remarkable is the fact that it's essentially a one-man show. Yeah, I can say that Kevin Spacey's in it, but he's barely in it. I mean, even the interactions with the robot are incredibly limited. Most of this film is Sam Rockwell and no one else. And it's incredible how well he carries it. I think that Sam Rockwell is one of those actors that is just criminally underappreciated because he is really phenomenal. And this is the first time I've really seen him get to really stretch as an actor. And what's amazing is that he ends up acting against... Now, this is a minor spoiler, so just want to warn you about that. If you really want to just go in to this film completely blind, I highly recommend it. Go for it. You'll really enjoy it. But minor spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. What's really incredible is that he ends up acting against himself for most of the movie. He encounters what is essentially his clone, and it's just the two of them for a big portion of the movie. And that works in with the story, but he's playing against himself. So when I say, like, he's playing a one-man show, he's playing a one-man show with multiple parts, and it's really good. At no point did I ever feel like the one person wasn't in the room, or that, you know, this one's clearly not looking at the other, or anything that would take me out of it. He totally sells it in such a great way. The general premise of the film is the fact that he is a worker on the moon, that essentially we're mining resources from the moon, and that he is a kind of a grunt labor worker who has agreed to a 2-year contract where he goes up to the moon and he operates this this whole operation that is largely automated. Like 90% of this whole thing is automated, but they still need one human person to kind of oversee and watch over it. So he agrees to go up there for 2 years. So he'll be alone on the moon.
Was it 2? I thought it was 3.
Oh, it might be 3. I'm sorry.
I forget. Either way, not let that changes the anything in this story. I'm just that guy that interrupts and goes, "Well, I thought it was this."
No, it's okay.
On a minor point, yeah.
But the point is, basically, he agrees to a certain contract where he'll be alone for that amount of time. But then when he gets back to Earth, and gets back with his loved ones, he's going to be paid handsomely and everything. Like, he has a family waiting for him back on Earth, and he misses them terribly. But he starts to question. Like, these things start to come up, and he starts to question whether what he thinks is true is real or not. And it's really good. I can't recommend it enough. And I think it's very underrated, not just because not enough people saw it, but because no one really seemed to give it credit either. Like, there's a small amount of people. I mean, it's gotten a cult following, but it's really frustrating that didn't get any nominations from the Academy at all. Or the Emmys, or I'm sorry, not the Emmys, the Golden Globes, the Oscars, anything. Now, don't get me wrong. If you know anything about my opinions about the Oscars, that's not surprising. Yeah. The Oscars are kind of a joke. But my point is that even amongst the lower awards, the technical awards for like the cinematographer and the actors awards and everything else, none of it was not recognized by anybody pretty much, and it's just frustrating because, like, it's such a fantastic film on almost every level. And to see it just not get any kind of credit that it deserves is just it's just frustrating.
It wasn't blow-uppy enough.
It wasn't. Yeah,
was it an actual U.S. film, or was it actually a UK or a European film?
I'm actually not sure where they filmed that one.
I know the director of that one is the same guy that just directed the recent Warcraft movie.
Really, that was the same guy.
Yeah, Andy's actually David Bowie's son, Duncan Jones.
Oh, that's surprising.
Yeah, so that's your director. If Michael Bay did it, the moon would blow up and there'd be a blue laser in the sky that's world ending.
Up to the sky, yeah. It's a far more subtle, intimate film that talks a lot more about people as a whole. It's just really unfortunate that it just didn't get more credit, I guess. And interestingly enough, this did come out the same year as Avatar, so it kind of ties into our overrated choice. But
there's multiple tie-ins to several of the films that I was mulling over and mentioning during this episode. One of the ones that I was initially wanting to talk about, which I'm probably not because I think I have already praised it enough before on the podcast, is Starship Troopers, which I think Starship Troopers, like the special effects have dated very, very well from coming out in 1997. It came out the same year as Titanic, and it actually lost out on its Academy Award for special effects from Titanic. So, James Cameron, thanks.
James Cameron! Epic, fist shaking into the sky when I say his name.
Yeah, I'll put an echo at the end of that.
James Cameron! James Cameron! James Cameron! James Cameron! Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say about Moon, really. Because ultimately, I'm just going to gush about it. Really, it's
right.
It's
what I would compare it to, and I think this goes with your controversial choice for the other overrated film.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
But it attempts to do the same kind of sci-fi story where it's not world-ending. It's not. It's a very personal story.
Well, it's more in the vein of true science fiction, where it's asking a question. It's asking a question about what makes us human, and certain ethical questions about like future technology, such as cloning and that sort of thing. Like, is it even ethically right to do this to him? Because he might be a short order clone, but he's still a person, and it just asks some big questions. And the best thing is, it doesn't really like shove your nose in it or grandstand or try to be like, here's the point, here's the moral of the story. Like it does a very good job of just being like, here's everything, and then you make your own conclusions, which I think is the best way to do this stuff. I think that's just the best way to do any kind of, not just science fiction, but really any kind of story with a point. I always think that it's much better to just simply say, here's a scenario, take what you will out of it, than to just, be that kind of soapbox movie that's just like, here's our agenda, forcing it down your throat. Because, no one wants to be preached at. That's really what it comes down to is there's a difference between movies that are trying to preach at you versus movies that are trying to ask questions and get you to think deeper about the possibilities of the future and what makes humans human. And
right, like Avatar tried to do. There was no grand question in that.
No.
But I'm not going to drag it back to Avatar.
So many plot holes too. Why don't you just dig under the tree? Like, why don't you had to blow up the tree? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And if the
planet, they're big bad military.
If the planet's alive, why didn't the planet stop them earlier? I mean, if the planet's really alive, the first time they drilled, do you think the planet shouldn't have woke up and be like, "Hey, what the hell's going on?" Connect by hair braid USB or whatever they have, and just be like, "Hey, there's some weird dudes over there. Can you, stop them?"
It's Ego's wife from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It's his ex-wife is the planet Awa. She was a bitch, so he had to leave her. Well, apparently no. He was the asshole because he wanted to destroy the galaxy. She was the nice one, so that's why they split up.
Interplanetary romance.
Well, I mean, why not? You've got Quill and Gamora.
Well,
I mean, at least they're built they look like to be built the same.
That's an interesting headcanon. I would be interested in pursuing that, but All right, let's move on to your underappreciated pick.
Well, my initial underappreciated pick was
Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers from '97. I feel like I've talked about it before. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't on episodes, but I've talked about it to so many people before, so I just feel like I'm almost like saying the same thing towards it. But I just more or less appreciate, satire, and so I really enjoy satirical films.
It's hard to pull off satire. I'll acknowledge that, because I think it's difficult for a lot of films to get the tone of satire just right. Because on the one hand, you don't want to necessarily be like a wacky comedy, but sometimes being too serious means that people don't get it, and they kind of read it more straight, and they're not reading in between the lines, and it's a hard thing to pull off.
Yeah, no, it is. And when I find, because obviously this Starship Troopers is the exact same people, not exact same, but the same people behind RoboCop that did Starship Troopers, and both films have very similar tones to them. Like the writer is Edward Neumeier, director is Paul Verhoeven, and it's based on the book of the same name, but the book is a more serious tone to it than the movie. The movie took the fascism aspect of the book and took it to a comical extreme in the movie, and that was where the satire was a satire on America again for their attitudes towards war. And the first lesson, the first lesson you get from Michael Ironside in the movie is violence solves everything, and it's very how it's shot is very TV show Beverly Hills 90210,
right? With
the lighting contrasted with the horrific violence of war. So he had a lot of people coming back from RoboCop doing it. So yeah, you have Basil Podores doing the score to it. It wasn't his best score. His best score to me is still Conan from '82. I feel like, again, I said it was nominated for special effects. The special effects really did hold up quite well over the years with their use of miniatures.
Yeah,
on top of CGI.
The practical effects are quite nice, and the early CGI is pretty good too. From a technical standpoint, they did a pretty good job. I'll admit, it still holds up pretty well.
It did, unfortunately, lose out to the special effects of Titanic. But again, the industry awards, I'm not gonna give them too much credit. They're just patting themselves on the back.
I don't want to make it seem like that's a huge deal, and it's not like they didn't get awards. They got awards on Moon. Moon got plenty of awards, especially British awards. And again, the Oscars and the Golden Globes are just straight up politics. That's a whole mess. We can talk about that some other time. But what bothered me more was the fact that the smaller awards, like awards for acting, awards for cinematography, awards for these technical awards that are still Hollywood, but it's far more of in the vein of what it should be, which is simply just hey, this is an acknowledgement that you've done a fantastic job, just that it didn't get even nominated. And I'm mostly mad for Sam Rockwell, simply because he really, really just blew me away as an actor in that. And not just me, pretty much every review you'll see on the movie talks about how great Sam Rockwell is. And the fact that he didn't get some kind of recognition for just such a phenomenal job is just kind of criminal. It kind of reminds me of Jim Carrey. Both of these guys were sort of just put into this box of, oh, you're the funny guy, and that's all they'll ever see. No matter how much these brilliant actors prove that they're brilliant actors, time and time and time again, they're always going to be seen as, hey, you're that funny guy.
You get put in a box, and then from that box you get typecast from that.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I'm just saying that's what bugged me more. Not to say that they had to get the accolade. It's more just that no one kind of paid attention, I guess.
And then again, back to Starship Troopers, I would say my biggest complaint about it would be that it's the pacing. It takes forever for the action or anything to kind of get going, which is nice because it does help you build up character development, but then you don't care about any of these characters. They're so intentionally written one-dimensional, so I don't care to build up anything with these people. And it's one of the few movies that I'm where I don't really care about most of the main cast, because it's not the purpose of it. It's more the world, I feel like, is the character more than some of the characters, because Johnny Rico is so football star who's dumb in school, so one-sided, who has this girl like chasing him the whole time, but he's after the one other one-dimensional girl, and the only people that have any sort of humanity to them die in the movie. That just comes back to it takes a while for anything to get going. There's a solid like 45 minutes to an hour before the movie gets going.
And
this random thought here, and again, I just recently watched. I was on a trip to Taiwan, and of course we had movies on the plane, so that's perfect time when you're on a long flight to watch free movies that you would not otherwise watch. and I tried watching Life. That movie pissed me off so much. Did you ever see it?
No, that one actually passed me by. I saw the trailer and I thought, yeah, I'll check it out, but it came and went out of theaters without me realizing it. So,
all right, well, don't watch it. That's my recommendation for it because it will just piss everybody off. And it disappointed me because I like the writers. The writers are Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, who wrote Zombieland and Deadpool, and it's just. You build up a connection with a few of the characters, but then none of it gets paid off. Everybody dies, and the world's over. Screw you. And it tried to be some twist ending, and I don't give a fuck if it's a spoiler alert. Stay away from it. I wanted to punch people when I left the plane because I was watching it on a plane. I was already mad. Maybe that's why I didn't enjoy it too much either. I'm on a long flight, and I'm watching this movie, and I'm just like wanted to punch the screen, but then there's somebody sitting in front of me too.
Don't punch somebody on a plane. That won't end well.
Yeah, well, we were over the Pacific Ocean too, so I'm
also even more reason not to.
Yeah,
but
nowhere to go.
You mentioned a couple of times the one-dimensional characters and how you just don't care, which is one of the cardinal sins of writing. One of the biggest cardinal sin of especially screenwriting. You can get away with this a little bit more, I think, in books than you can in movies, but you cannot make it so that the audience doesn't care. That's like the worst thing you can do. Like if you write characters that are so unlikable that the audience just doesn't care, then you've failed as a writer. Because the problem is that there's no buy-in. At that point, there's no way that the audience can go with them on that journey, that voyage, because empathy from an audience is the cornerstone of what makes them invest in what you're showing them. Now, that's not to say that you can't have heroes that aren't likable. Because here's the trick. You can have people that are bad. Like, you can have characters that are bad, immoral, evil people. But as long as they have charm, then the audience can still connect with them. Take Deadpool, for instance. Deadpool's a perfect example. Deadpool is not a good person. He is a cold-blooded killer. He is unabashedly a cold-blooded killer. And if you presented him as nothing but a cold-blooded killer, no audience would like it. They'd be like, why on earth are we watching this? What is this? But they made him charming. They made him fun. They made him likable. Where you can kind of get past that. And you can realize that it's all kind of silly and over the top. Anyway, my point is, it doesn't matter. You can have characters on all parts of the spectrum of good and evil, but you still need to make them charming or entertaining or interesting enough that the audience invests in them. Darth Vader, for instance, is incredibly compelling. You want to watch Darth Vader when he shows up. So to have a movie, any movie, that basically just says, well, here's this guy. You're supposed to like him because he's the main character. That's not enough.
Yeah, what I questioned it with Starship Troopers, though, because...
Well, in Starship Troopers, I think they're doing it on purpose.
Right. Yeah, it's like they're purposely writing them to be this way, like writing them to be shallow.
Which I think is one of the rare cases you can get away with it, because, like you said, it's more about establishing the world. What I was building up to here is I was talking about movies where they've lost me in the first half hour because, like, I'm a half hour into the movie, and then I realize... well, there's no reason for me to even keep watching because I don't care about anybody. I don't like anybody. I don't care what happens to anybody. And that honestly is why I almost went with Gravity as my pick for Overrated. Because Gravity is a really, again, like Avatar, it's a brilliantly technically done movie. Like, the special effects and the way they achieved simulating weightlessness and everything is phenomenal. It's a really, really well done movie, but it fails so epically at making me care.
They relied on casting way too much.
Well, the
for
thing
that.
is like George Clooney kind of gets on my nerves. And the thing is I didn't find him charming. I didn't find him interesting. And every time he's on screen, I'm just kind of annoyed.
In that movie or in general?
In that movie. I mean, I haven't minded him in other movies, but for some reason in this one, he was just kind of like nails on a chalkboard to me. And I think it was because they were trying too hard. It's like they were trying really hard to make you like him when he just wasn't that likable. You know, and with Sandra Bullock, aside from just the couple of mentions that she has family on Earth, you know so little about her. And that's kind of the problem, is that the whole movie is this giant roller coaster ride of like, is she going to make it? Is she not going to make it? But I don't really care because I don't know anything about her. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like I wouldn't feel bad if she didn't make it, but there's just not the same level of urgency to it, or the stakes just didn't feel like they were there. I spent most of Gravity just kind of being like, okay, you know, she's either going to make it to Earth or she's going to die out in space. But I kind of feel like she's going to make it to Earth because otherwise, what movie do we have here? They're not going to have her barely miss dying like 16 times in the movie just to die at the end anyway.
That's why I don't suggest watching Life.
Oh, that's a good point. I guess that's what I'm getting at with Gravity. Gravity to me just felt more like it was something that was very predictable from the get-go because there's only one way you can end the film without really ticking off most of the audience. And I just didn't really care much about the characters because I just didn't really have time to empathize with them other than just simply thinking, wow, wouldn't it be terrifying if that was me?
Yeah, I think that's what they were relying on with a lot of it.
I think so. But
because it's very forgettable. Like the movie, like I haven't watched it in a long time, and all I can honestly tell you is like, okay, they're both in space, debris happens, George Clooney dies, she makes it down and walks off on a beach.
That's basically the movie. I haven't seen it since I left theater. Like I watched it in theaters when it came out in 2013, I think, and I haven't seen it since. So I mean, granted, my memory's a little fuzzy, but that's most of the movie, and I could harp on the scientific and inaccuracies, but I don't like doing that because, you know, it's a movie. And at the end of the day, all movies are going to take liberties with physics and, you know, the world because reality's boring. So I'm not going to give them crap for that. It's more just because it's more just the overall feeling of simply like, okay, that happened. There's not much going on there story-wise. It's because the entire movie is essentially spectacle, I guess. But I guess that leads me to my actual pick for Overrated, which I'm probably going to get some slack for this one, but I'm going to say it anyway. Hold your pitchforks, because I will explain.
I'm about to drop everything and just be like, all right, we're done. Thanks for listening. We'll never be back.
It's not that bad. I mean, you know, if I'd have picked... I think that would have happened if I'd have picked something, you know, a little bit more like iconic. If I'd said
like, I can't stand Alien and T2.
Yeah, if I'd have said Blade Runner or something, then yeah, maybe we'd be done here. But no, my pick is actually Arrival, with Amy Adams.
You have to explain yourself, so don't do that pause thing.
I just want to start by saying I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't. I genuinely don't think it's a bad movie. I actually liked it. I didn't love it. I liked it. But truth be told, it's being put on quite a pedestal. Like, since it's come out, there's been a lot of attention given to it. You know, even on YouTube, for instance, there's been several video essays done about how great it is, etc., etc. And there just seems to be a lot of praise being heaped on it time and time again. And some of it's deserved, but ultimately, I really feel like this is a lot of praise for a movie that's okay. It's not great. It's good. It's somewhere in that 3.5 out of 5 star range for me. And mostly it's because of story issues. The biggest of which being that this originally started out as, I think, a 10-minute short. I'm not exactly sure how long the original was. That they stretched into a feature, and it feels like it. It really feels like there's a lot of filler in the movie. There's just a lot of stuff that really doesn't need to be in there. The whole thing where they're trying to, and spoiler alert going into it, the whole thing that they're trying to do with tricking you into thinking, you know, that like certain things happened before or were happening during, but they're actually going to happen in the future because of the perception of time thing, I actually thought was kind of dumb. Simply because I remember even when I was watching it thinking, this isn't right. Like, this doesn't make sense. I don't know. Maybe it was just because in the theater I kept thinking that this doesn't make sense. Like, the things didn't match up right, so I was already guessing that this was like an out of continuity thing. The aliens were really interesting. I really loved what they did with the alien language, the pods, the whole thing. There's a lot of really good ideas, and there's good science fiction in this movie. There's really good old school science fiction happening in this movie. So I don't want to give it too much grief. It's just, I thought the movie would have been much better if it hadn't tried to do this grand aha moment at the end that I just don't think it really got there. At least for me. I mean, my wife said the same thing. She actually was watching it, and she specifically remembers being very irritated by the opening scene, because the opening scene essentially lies to you and makes you think that that's part of continuity, and it's not. Now, I understand that that's like a big linchpin of the whole story, is the fact that, once you understand their language, you can actually start to perceive things outside of time, which was the big thing, is those aliens could see things outside of time. That's why they even helped humans, is because humans will eventually help them. I get that. I still think it's kind of dumb. Largely,
you think it would have been better as if it stayed as short, or because what was it, 10 minutes? Did you think it would have been better as like a 30-minute short? Or
no, I just think that the whole twist with like the changing of perception of time thing was just kind of, maybe it's not necessarily a bad idea. Maybe it was just poorly executed. I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, to me, it's hard for me to buy into the idea that a new language will actually change your way of thinking and reprogram your brain to the point where you don't perceive time linearly. That's a big pill for me to swallow.
Yeah, like, I mean, all based on a language.
Yeah, even on just sci-fi terms, where I'll accept a lot because, hey, sci-fi, but the idea that we can suddenly change our perception and then magically we can actually see time all at once, like an omnipresent being, is just a lot for me to take in. Because, and maybe this is just me thinking too much about it, but that would change not just a person, that would change the way all society works forever. Like, it's something that I don't even know how to explain, because you can't really put yourself in the mental state there. But, like, imagine if you saw your entire life all at once and you perceived every single moment of your life in time all at once. You'd have to still make the same decisions because you've already been there, because it's happened before, it'll happen again. There's all these things that just, it makes your brain hurt when you start going there. But the idea that, like, we just learn an alien language and then suddenly we can all be, like, super omnipresent as far as perception goes, and that won't really change much about the way we live, but it's going to make us ready to help the aliens in the future. I'm sorry, I just couldn't buy into it. And maybe that's just me, like I said, there's a lot of people that really enjoyed it, and I still think that everything else in the movie is phenomenal. I really love everything they did with the actual translation, with the aliens themselves, their ship, the presentation of everything. It was all really good. I just think the weakest link in this whole film is their big attempt at trying to, like, have that big twist ending at the end, because it's like, it barely stops China from, like, nuking the ship or something. And yeah, I just think the film would have been better if it hadn't tried to do all that.
Anytime you start messing with time in your story, it gets messy. And you start questioning way too much, because it never works. It never works out. And I think they tried to address that in that movie Looper, I believe. I have
not seen Looper. Please don't spoil it for me. I'm very much looking forward to seeing it. I'm gonna watch it before before Star Wars 8 comes out, because it's the same director.
Yeah. Well, there's one line in there that basically says, if we start questioning how time works, it's basically telling the audience, let it go, stop questioning things. Because you're just going to give yourself a headache.
Right. Well, and it just kind of feels like a bit of a cheap setup to just be like, why are the aliens here to teach us their language? Oh, because we'll help them later. Okay. Like, all right.
No, yeah, time is. If I was ever going to write something, I don't think I could. I'm not going to even touch time travel. It's way too messy.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, you can do time travel very well in a film. I mean, Back to the Future is like
You can.
your
I'm not
blueprint.
going to
I
want
mean,
to tackle
like,
it.
Back to the Future is like the perfect way to do time travel. It's not time travel I have a problem with. I have more of a problem with the fact that just the whole premise just felt very, I don't want to say tacked on, but it just felt very, like, not fleshed out. Like, it's like every single answer just was like, here's just enough for you to just get on board with it. Like, oh, the aliens are here to teach us their language. Why? Because we're going to help them in the future. Okay. Why do they know this? Because they can see outside of time. Okay. Well, now that we know this, we can see outside of time too. All right. I'm finding it's hard for me to articulate, but it's just, there's something about the way that it was constructed, the way it was presented, because it keeps trying very hard through the movie to try to pull the wool over your eyes and make you think that these things happened in one order when in fact they're happening in a completely different order. And they try to really wow you with it at the end, like, haha, like, we got you. And I just didn't really, it just felt unearned to me. And maybe it was just because while I was watching it, those things didn't add up to me. I didn't make the assumption that those things were happening at the same time. Like, to me, I was like, something's weird here. Like, why do we keep showing her and with the kid and all these things? And I don't know.
I don't think the film was really meant for you or whoever like could dissect it. I enjoyed Arrival, but I didn't buy it. It was one of those, I wasn't disappointed when I left. I was just like, hey, that was all right. But I mean, I agree with you.
Like I said, I wasn't disappointed, but it's still a good movie.
No, I'm not. Yeah, but when your mind is trained to a different way than I think the general movie going audience, because the movie going audience is just, they do make assumptions.
It's true. That's true.
They make a lot of assumptions. So I think it banked on the assumptions too much, and it did feel like a 10-minute short that they just stretched out. It was like, how can we fit this into a 90-minute movie?
Right. I don't mind movies that are slow paced, but I do mind a movie that's slow paced that's basically just filler, like
slow paced filler.
Yeah, like filler. I'm
coming
not okay
to a
with.
theater near you.
And yeah,
oh man, that sounds like an awesome trailer. We need to do a joke trailer called "Slow Paced Filler."
That'd be like
sounds
a lot
amazing.
That'd be like a lot of indie movies I've seen. A lot of indie movies, they do that really slow paced stuff, and they have shots where people just stare at the lens, and it's supposed to be artsy. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, the St. Louis Comic-Con, man. It was that stop motion one that.
Oh god,
I don't care I don't care if that person eventually finds this podcast. I'd fuck you for making that.
For those that don't know, obviously, we're referring to a film festival that we were both at because of a film we worked on together, and there was one in particular that I know he's referring to that was very, very slow, and was 40 minutes long and should have been about 5.
Oh my god!
And when I looked over, I've never seen Ben look so much like a trapped coyote trying to gnaw his own leg off to get free.
I think I was looking to see if that prick was in the audience. It's like I really wanted to have a word with him. Like, you cannot unleash this on the world.
Yeah.
This is like inhumane.
I don't think it went anywhere after that, but I have no idea. I didn't follow up on that or anything.
I forgot the title. I think you eventually told or found out the title and then told me, and I made it my life's goal to not even remember. I really hated that.
Personally, I was just bored. I got nothing against like the filmmaker or anything else. I just, to me it was.
I do now.
I know you do. I'm just saying, like, for me personally, I was just like, well, let's just keep this moving. But yeah, but you're right. I mean, full disclosure, I should mention that we've talked about this in other podcasts. I am a filmmaker. I direct my own shorts, and I was always working hard to do more. I've been actually working as videographer, video editor, special effects artist, et cetera, in the industry for about 10 years now, doing a variety of projects. So, yeah, I mean, my brain is wired differently than your average moviegoer, that's for sure. I look for edits because I know an edit is intentional. So cinema language is different to me than your average person. And quite frankly, because I've pointed out so much to my wife over the years, she's gotten to be the same way. So even my comments with like what she said about the movie are probably influenced by me teaching her the tricks of cinema over the years.
When you lift the veil behind it, it does ruin it for other people.
And I'm sorry. I'm very sorry that because I don't intend to do that with some of my friends, and I have unintentionally ruined the movie magic for a couple of people, and I've gotten much better about it. I'm very aware of it now, and I try not to ruin it for people anymore. But yeah, unfortunately, my wife, that ship has sailed. She's on it. I told her once, because my wife has no interest in filmmaking. Like she loves the fact that I love movies, and she's very tolerant of it, and she's very supportive, which is fantastic. But that's not her passion in life. She has other things that she's interested in, and she's fantastic at them. But we were joking a few months ago, actually, about how I told her, I said, in another 5 to 10 years, I actually would love to see you direct a short film. And she kind of laughed, and she said, well, why? And I said, because I'm really curious to see, after just indulging me for all the years we've been married, how much of this has sort of like rubbed off, like I'm very curious, like just as an experiment. I think it'd be kind of cool to see her like make a short film with no interest in it other than like what I've told her, and see what she comes up with. I actually think she could make a fantastic film.
Just directing or writing?
I don't know. I mean, I hadn't really given it that much thought. Probably directing, I guess. That's probably what I've told her the most about. But
she'd be too nice to everybody, man.
She would be. She's, but everybody would love her. She's incredibly likable. But you're right. I don't know if she would really like crack the whip on people that were being too uppity.
Yeah, some people need the whip crack. That's metaphorical too. I'm not condoning violence against your crew.
Yeah, although Hitchcock might have. He's the kind of guy that I could see. If they would have let him get away with it, he probably would have brought an actual whip or something. But
I know Stanley Kubrick was kind of an asshole too to some of his people. Like he just like look out from behind the camera after yelling cut, then would just go act better.
Yeah,
and that's like the only thing he would say.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that. My one of my favorites is Hitchcock, where an actor supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but it's an anecdote that it's been spread around, but supposedly an actor came up to Hitchcock and said to him, like, I really don't understand this character. What's my motivation? And he said to them, your salary.
Yeah.
So
that's
I'm like, well, it's kind of true.
Yeah, it is true. It's
not helpful to your actor. I mean,
well, unless his next scene was panic, it probably helped him. And there's a lot of those panicking scenes. Or if it was on birds, then she'd just like, now pretend I just said that to you while you're out there screaming with a bunch of birds.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us today. But we want to know what you guys think. This has largely been mostly Ben and I talking this whole time, but we've recently started posting these podcasts on YouTube. And we're going to get some different hosting options here in the near future. So depending on where you've been listening to this, there should be an option for you to leave some kind of comment or feedback for us. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what your picks are for underappreciated and overrated, as well as what you think about this format, about us changing it up every so often. We're still fine with giving you guys sci-fi movie news and just generally talking about what we think about what's going on. But we wanted to break it up every so often and do kind of these themed episodes. So let us know what you guys think. But until next time, this has been Space Problems. I'm Derek.
And I'm Ben.
And we'll see you guys next time.